Hello, I'm Claire Freeman, Director of the Natural History Society of Northumbria. Welcome to this week's talk, one in a series of NHSN's Winter Nature Talks programme. As a society, we've been sharing talks since the year we were founded in 1829. And in those early years, many people would have been isolated in their pursuit of natural history. So over those 191 years since, we have been bringing people together to hear about the latest discoveries and environmental findings. This year, digital technology, we hope, will enable us to share the talks with many more people to inspire them to care for and protect nature. Please do visit our website to find out more about NHSN, and also you might like to keep in touch with us for news about North East nature. I'll now hand over to one of my colleagues who will introduce this week's speakers, and I hope you enjoy the talks.
Hello and welcome to this week's 1829 talk. You're very welcome. I am Professor Annie Tindley and it's my honour to be one of the trustees of the Natural History Society of Northumbria and to be introducing these 1829 series of talks to you. The 1829 talks highlight and celebrate the year of our foundation as a society, as one of the oldest and most honourable natural history societies in Britain. And the purpose of these talks is to allow a platform and showcase for the most exciting and cutting edge new research being undertaken by our early career researchers. So they're here really to share with us the latest findings in environmental research. As such, I hope you enjoy this week's talk. And I could urge you, if you can, to follow us on social media, Natural History Society of Northumbria, and enjoy the talk.
Good evening, and thank you so much for coming to my 1829 talk on balancing wildlife conservation in the community. In this talk, I'm going to be talking about a little site called Embleton Quarry and how a management plan for the site was developed by me and the Embleton Quarry Steering Committee. And I'm also going to be talking about my graduate traineeship, which is really important and sort of developing me as an early careers conservationist. So a little bit about me and my background and how I found myself on the Northumberland coast. I started my career in conservation in 2015 when I started an undergraduate degree in conservation biology and ecology at the University of Exeter. And it was there that I found a love for sort of all things marine and coastal, and also enjoyed taking research and applying it to practical conservation. And when I graduated in 2018, I undertook a master's at Newcastle University in Biodiversity, Conservation, Ecosystem Management, which was kind of the perfect way to take that interest and expand on it. I particularly enjoyed the ecosystem management side of things, and we got to do 2 weeks volunteering around Northumberland. I sort of found a love for the North East and the conservation projects up here as well. So I started as a Coast Care graduate trainee in May last year and finished in February this year. So 9 months as a graduate trainee, where my main task was developing this management plan, but I did so much more as well, which I'll go into later. And at the moment, I'm a volunteer warden at Gosforth Nature Reserve, and I'm kind of waiting for another internship to start in November. So a little bit about Embleton Quarry. I'm not sure too many people have heard about the site, but it is a site worth knowing about. It has a really diverse history. So it was, as the name suggests, a quarry for whinstone sets, and it was a massive employer in that area around Embleton. So it ran for 100 years, from the 1860s to the 1960s, and it was so prosperous that the Mersey Tunnel was paved with whinstone sets from Embleton Quarry. When it finally closed in 1961, it became a landfill site for about 10 years. And in the 70s, it was assessed for development, but deemed unsuitable, so it was left for nature in the late 1970s. In 2015, the Embleton Parish Council gained the quarry through a community asset transfer from Northumberland County Council, and through that transfer they're also given a sort of small management plan and a grant to get them started on the site. The site is currently managed by Embleton Quarry Steering Committee, which is part of the Parish Council, and it's managed by local volunteers and Coast Care volunteers, which is another charity based in, or coastal conservation charity based in sea houses. The site, surprisingly, considering its very unnatural sort of development and past, is home to some really rare and interesting species. So currently home to, I think, 3 or 4 different types of orchids, so marsh, pyramidal orchid, bee orchid, and also some really unique habitats. So coastal mixed scrub and grassland is a really surprisingly rare habitat, but really important as well. Its current uses include dog walking, that's its main use, used by locals for walking, tourism, so it's visited by people who come up to visit Embleton Bay and Crasta as well, and education, so there is a primary school next door that go down to use it, and while I was working as a graduate trainee, we set up a programme with them to develop their own wildflower meadow using seed bombs, and taught them about bees and pollinators and how important they were as well. So this is a picture taken on site in 1910, and actually you can see the size of the workforce and just how big an operation it was. They had 2 of these engines, so this one picture is called the Dunstanburgh, and you can see how the site has changed from when these pictures were taken in 1910 to now. Obviously you can see the house as a reference point from how it was as a quarry to see how it is a sort of like a mixed scrub, scattered tree, tall ruderal, grassland habitat. One of the most important characters that we have on site is the tree sparrow. So the tree sparrows are breeding in the derelict quarry house on site, and they use the mixed scrub for feeding and roosting. So the tree sparrow, as you probably know, is on the red list for UK conservation. So it's a species of conservation priority. They're globally threatened, and they experienced a 93% decline between 1993 and 2007, which is absolutely staggering. And this decline was probably due to habitat loss, but mostly to the changes in agricultural practices. So they rely on seeds from weeds and plants, which are removed by herbicides and things like that. But they are breeding at a quarry, so it's one reason for this management plan and why we need to protect the site and why the site is so important. As well as fauna, there's a lot of botanical interest on site. So I've already mentioned the bee orchids, which are exceptionally attractive plants. They have a habit of growing really close to footpaths, so they do tend to get trampled, but we're hoping with management they'll start growing in different areas and increasing in their distribution. It's also home to a plant that I hadn't heard of before starting the traineeship, but it's home to purple ramping fumitory. So purple ramping fumitory is nationally scarce, and there's only 2 or 3 records for it in Northumberland, which is including the quarry. So we're hoping with management that this plant will also increase in distribution to some of the more nutrient poor soils within the quarry, because there are a few sites where it's actually should be really suitable. Also, the most notable habitat on site is winged grassland. The exposed whinstone left over from the quarry is the perfect habitat for this really unique sort of species assemblage. So winged grassland is unique to Northumberland and only found on these whin outcrops, and it has the potential for rare species such as pink maiden, biting stonecrop and wild chives. And you can find these species in other grassland areas, but it's the fact that they come together on whin grassland that makes them so unique. And the whin grassland at the quarry has been invaded by scrub and invasive species such as Cotoneaster. So scrub management in those areas and removal of the invasive species are probably the most important thing to try and improve or have the potential for a really species-rich whin grassland on site. So last August, I undertook or ran a BioBlitz on site. It had a lot of benefits of showing what was there, as well as gathering sort of experts from all around the northeast to sort of say, actually, this is what I do on site, and these are the important things we should protect. So it was quite a good basis to be able to inform the management plan. But as well as that, because it was an event, it was such a good day for engagement and getting local people down to the quarry and see what was down there. So we ran pond dipping and a mini beast hunt for the local kids. but also had a bat walk, small mammal trapping, which is really well attended, and bird ringing. And these are the kind of things that you wouldn't normally get to do unless you were working in conservation. So it was a really interesting day. And the day ended with a history talk about the quarry to kind of highlight how important it is in terms of North East history and local history as well. So we had a lot of people visit and sign up to volunteer as well with the quarry committee. And it was a brilliant day all round. It was really warm, and I enjoyed it at least. But the results of it were pretty much incredible. There were so many things that we didn't expect. So for example, the bat walk, we had brown long-eared bats, a massive array of small mammals that I think rely on the scrub in the site, which kind of highlights how important that is as well. The pond was probably the most surprising thing, because we thought that it was poisonous and not compatible with any kind of life, but there was newts, which are particularly sensitive to pollution, and a massive range of plants and species that we didn't know were there, which kind of showed that the pond is a really, even though not a natural pond, how important it was as well. So we totaled 280 species, 87 species in 24 hours, which was pretty incredible. And we even got to explore the lichens on site. So this is a picture of some of the lichen diversity on site, which is something that people don't tend to look at as well, but also something that we hope to increase with the planting of some native trees. So that was a really exciting day, and it was a great basis for writing the management plan. So the management plan, the most important thing about this talk and how it was developed, it was difficult because a lot of things had to be considered. So the original management plan that I was working off was literally just wing grassland and a little bit about scrub and invasive species. And after 5 years, the parish council had sort of run out of things to do that were actually making a big difference on site. So the management plan was developed based on the BioBlitz results, so what species we had, where they were, what habitats were best for them, the current uses, so we had to consider access for dog walkers, tourists, education, that kind of thing, and future aspirations for the site, what it might look like in 10, 25, 100 years, and what we wanted from it. So the management plan in the end included a series of footpaths, signposted walks, including a woodland walk around newly planted native trees, education, so interpretation of the history and the species there, because people don't realise when they're seeing a tree sparrow that actually it might be one of the most endangered species in the UK, and what they're seeing is quite important, as well as the bee orchids and the ramping fumitory. We also wanted to get a bird screen up to allow people to engage with the wetland birds on site without causing any kind of disturbance. And education was particularly important as well. So we're hoping to use some of the big windstone sets to create a sort of circular seating area for the school. And I think people, if they see school kids using it as well, because there was an issue with sort of dog fouling and littering, but I'm hoping if people see that the school are using it and the kids and actually realise how important it is, there might be less of those kind of issues. And I think if people see how important it is as well, and kind of how exciting being part of the development of this site is, you're more likely to get local volunteers. One of the contentious issues for developing this management plan was grazing, because grazing kind of goes against the whole value of keeping open access for dog walkers. So finding a compromise for that was really important. So the grazing is limited to one part of the site each winter for only a couple of months when it's less busy in winter, and only for 2 ponies. It is absolutely essential on a grassland site to have grazing. As you'll see across a lot of Northumberland, grazing is used to help maintain biodiversity and this sort of mosaic that we look for in the site of different ages and species. And the more diverse it is in its plant life, the more diverse it will be for its animal life as well. So grazing was essential, and finding out all of the information about grazing with the parish council, as opposed to sort of just guessing how expensive it would be and guessing the impact, was probably the most challenging but most important thing about this management plan. And I'm happy to say that we do have 2 Exmoor ponies arriving on site soon. And in 6 months since this management plan was finished, the change on site and the positivity towards it has been absolutely amazing to hear from the parish council. So earlier this year, they were awarded the Prince of Wales Foundation grant for tools and mechanical tools for the maintenance and for building like the bird screen and things like that. So I had to write a report, a 6-month report for that grant, and I got an email back from the Quarry Committee, and I've been following the social media, and so much has happened despite what's going on in the world at the moment. Like it really does bode well for the future. So at the moment they got the grant for those tools. They've got 7 or 8 volunteers per session, where before it was maybe 1 or 2. We've got the grazing on site, which bodes really well for the wildflower meadow. The school's been using it regularly for education, so going down and mixing sort of creative side of nature and using nature for art and things like that, which is really, really exciting. So I'm really proud of what happened. And in terms of the species of interest, the bee orchid has popped up all around site due to this management, and we hope it might do more because it likes the sort of trampled areas, so it might enjoy sites where the ponies have been and where their hooves have kind of poached up the mud a little bit. In 10 years time, I can't imagine what it's going to be like, but I hope that maybe the woodland has grown a bit more, there'll be the signs and interpretation, maybe more visitors, potentially more species of birds and things like that. And then looking far into the future, I hope that the site definitely has the potential to become something like Gosforth Nature Reserve, with regular visitors, the kind of engagement that they have across the northeast, and become part of this network of amazing nature reserves that we have up here, with all of the species of interest as well. So there's definitely a really exciting future for Embleton Quarry. I just want to say very quickly a little bit about the traineeship as well, because the traineeship is probably one of the best things that I could have chosen to do post graduating. So it was 9 months, 3 days a week, and I was paid a small stipend, which meant it was a lot more sustainable than long-term volunteering. And because it was 3 days a week, I could work alongside as well. And as well as writing this management plan, which was like an incredible experience in itself, and working with the parish council, I got to do practical conservation training such as chainsaws, dry stone walling, brush cutter, scything, volunteer leadership, networking, ID courses. I did a spider ID course, ran events like the BioBlitz, did education and outreach, and so much more. So I got to work with NIFCA and the Environment Agency doing salt marsh and fish surveys, which was an incredible experience, and it truly bridged the gap between graduation and full-time employment and gave me the skills that I would need for full-time employment. So I really want to implore anybody who's in the position to be able to provide somebody with early careers conservationists with a traineeship with a small stipend to be able to do so, because it has been incredibly valuable to me and anyone else who, or the person who takes on Embleton Quarry in the future. So for me, I'm using the volunteer leadership skills that I learned and the botanical survey skills and the ecological survey skills to do an internship, hopefully starting in November in Belize with a crocodile conservation charity, or the Crocodile Research Coalition, which is really exciting. And I hope after that to come back to the northeast and get involved with practical conservation. I'm also really interested in sort of like project development and management for conservation projects, and I feel like that writing the management plan with Embleton Quarry has been exceptionally useful for maybe that kind of aspect of future work. Lastly, I really just want to thank everybody at Coast Care and the Embleton Parish Council for having me on board and developing the role. In 9 months, I have learned so much, and working with so many people that are so passionate about what they do, it does give you a positivity for the future of conservation. You can definitely get bogged down with all the bad things that are happening, but working with these people just made everything okay. Like there was so much going on. And so many projects and so much funding, and so yeah, I have to really thank Coast Care, especially Ian Robson, for getting me involved in all of that. Particularly as the photo shows here, I've really enjoyed scything, and the importance of traditional methods and things cannot be understated. It was so much fun and really good for wildflower meadow, so we hope to use that in Embleton Quarry as well at some point, and we did. It was just the big rocks sort of whacked out our sides. But thank you so much for listening, and if you get a chance, if you're up that way, please do visit Embleton Quarry Nature Reserve. It's a great place to explore and discover things, and if you are local, the steering committee are looking for volunteers to help with the management, and if you want to keep up with what's going on in the quarry and how the management is going and how the quarry is changing, I definitely recommend following their Facebook and their Twitter. But thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening.